So that should be us live. Just about. Okay. Yeah. Just a couple of minutes to go before the show starts, folks. I do this bit of streaming beforehand for technical reasons, so that I can pull in my guests. So let's have a good show. And yeah, I'll see you in a sec. Hold on. Oh, blimey. There we go. Yeah. One, two, da-di-da-da. Ooh. Oh, seems to be working. Hello. Oh, look at that. Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, we'll be right with you. Hold on. Daily Brexit, live at 5, Tuesdays and Thursdays. Daily Brexit, coming up shortly. Live on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 5 p.m. Live at 5, Tuesdays and Thursdays. Daily Brexit, yes, coming up soon. Daily Brexit. One, two, da-di-da-da. Ooh. Oh, seems to be working. Hello. Oh, look at that. Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, we'll be right with you. Hold on. Daily Brexit, live at 5, Tuesdays and Thursdays. Daily Brexit, coming up shortly. Live on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 5 p.m. Live at 5, Tuesdays and Thursdays. Daily Brexit, yes, coming up soon. Daily Brexit. Hey folks, and welcome to the Daily Brexit. Oh yeah, and today's show, Henry Bolton. I'll tell you what, I just had a nightmare trying to get my guests in to get this show on the road at the top of the hour, yeah, so I just need a breather. Yeah. Holding democracy to account, fighting for self-determination, exposing plutocracy. I'm Olly Connolly. Thanks for turning up. Today's show, it's round 2 in Daily Brexit's UKIP leadership candidate interviews. Because after all, no other bugger's doing this. The fake stream is totally asleep, huh? Henry Bolton is here to set out his stall. And we've got Mark Childs, too, chipping in. As can you. Please do. Questions, corrections, addendums, suggestions, I'll see you in the comments, and I will try to field your concerns. This is the Daily Brexit, just trying to find out what generally the ruddy hell is going on. And that's enough of that. Right, okay, I can't be bothered with the news section today, but I suspect we'll cover the gist of that, of the news, with our guest, UKIP leadership contender, Henry Bolton, breathing heavily on the end of his phone, unless that's Mark Childs. Henry, are you there, sir? Good to have you on the show.
I am here. Good evening.
Oh, you sound terrible. Are you in the middle of a? Is it raining or something?
No, it's not raining. No, Ollie. It's I'm in the foyer of a hotel in Vienna.
Right. Okay. All right. Okay. Your kids are at school there, aren't you? You're actually quite a European kind of a character.
Yeah, I can't seem to settle down. Yeah, my 2 daughters are at nursery school here, and my wife works here.
Okay, all right. What does your wife do, out of interest? I didn't research that bit. Sorry, hands up.
Yeah, she has a very grand sounding title. She is the senior secretary to the director of the Conflict Prevention Centre of the Organisation for Security and Cooperation in Europe, which is the world's largest international governmental security organisation.
Right. Okay. So you've got an advisor right there.
I have a bit of an inside line on the latest on the diplomatic security front.
I know that's your suit as well, and we're going to be coming on to talk a lot about security in the show, I'm sure. Is it difficult campaigning from Vienna? I mean, presumably you're jet-setting a bit.
I'm only here for a few days as the family are moving within Vienna. So I was called upon to help out, and luckily this is probably the quietest week in the campaign for probably 5 or 6 weeks. So
right.
The timing is handy. But I'll be back in the next couple of days.
Well, it's going to be very busy for you next week, I'm sure. What is your outlook on this campaign, the various manifestos, the characters, and do you think UKIP can pull together thereafter? Because it looks somewhat fragmented, no?
Well, Olly, you've asked enough questions to keep us going there for the whole night, I think.
I have. You've got 1 minute.
Thank you very much. It's like the hustings all over again. Can UKIP pull together? Yes, UKIP can pull together, but if it's going to, it needs to identify with a particular cause. Everybody within the party needs to align themselves behind one vision, one leader, and really one approach. If the party can't pull together, then it's going to have a difficult time, whoever the leader is. And I think we've seen quite, in some respects, an interesting campaign for this leadership, but it's been quite varied. And I think as time has gone on, the difference between the different candidates has made itself felt. So I hope that whoever wins this, the others are going to be able to, not necessarily just the candidates, I'm talking about their supporters across the party. I hope they're going to be able to align behind the party and behind the new leader. That's going to be the question, and I think it's probably the greatest task, the most challenging task, really, facing the new leader. And if we think about Brexit itself, the referendum really brought together a very disparate crowd of people under the one banner. And Brexit is far from over. It's not been delivered at all yet. And I think we'll probably get onto that later on. But that still remains, in my view, the core task of the party. There are other tasks moving on beyond that. Brexit doesn't end on the day that we leave the European Union, the Customs Union, or the single market, or the clutches of the ECJ. It's about making a success of it going further forward. So I think that should be an ample enough purpose to allow people to unite behind the party.
In terms of
whether some of the more focused campaigns, if I can call it that, whether supporters of those particular issues will be able to align with a broader approach. I hope they will.
Where would you set yourself amongst the candidates in terms of, if you like, your line on what we should be focusing on now?
I think I think the dominant one in terms of defining Brexit as the core purpose of the party. And I've been, I think, the only one who has really talked passionately about Brexit not ending the day we leave the European Union, but as I've just said, making sure that Brexit launches us as a country on the road to prosperity, security, and above all, optimism for everybody who lives in the UK. So the others have, as I say, been rather focused, whether it's direct democracy or whether it's a focus on Islam and immigration, which are all relevant issues, absolutely, and they've got to be crucial parts of a broad platform. But as standalone issues or issues of main focus and main effort, I think we'll be missing a trick. We'll be letting ourselves down in terms of delivering our traditional core purpose.
So how do you go about this kind of maze, if you like? Because the party really does seem to have largely two camps in terms of the way they want to approach the future, it seems to me. Well, at least, obviously, Anne-Marie Waters is a very popular candidate, but it does seem that she wants to concentrate more on the, if you like, the questions surrounding integration, and particularly Muslim integration, as opposed to, well, I mean, are we not in danger of losing our focus on Brexit, which is, after all, what UKIP was set up to achieve?
I think we are, Olly, and when I try to look into the longer term, and I've been involved in strategic planning at the political and diplomatic level across the whole of the Northern Hemisphere, and it's big picture stuff. And if I apply that to our party, then I think it goes beyond Brexit. What is it we're actually trying to achieve? Not just independence and autonomy and sovereignty from Brussels, but why do we want to do that? We want to do it because we want to express ourselves. We want to we want to control our own destiny, not have it controlled by somebody else. But surely part of that, for me, part of that is about making sure to express ourselves, that we can project ourselves into a position of global trade, prosperity, and security, and, as I say, optimism. And I think that is a long-term goal. If we look at people across the UK, there's a vast swathe of the population that is disenfranchised, doesn't have a voice. I think there's a significant proportion of the people listening to us now who are frustrated at the fact that they have little or no say in local development planning, in how public transport is organised, whether or not their doctor surgeries are closing, whether or not there's an NHS hub being created. There's a whole range of issues that people are frankly neglected on. They don't get a voice. And I think this is what we want from Brexit, is it not? We want to have our own voice and have a say in our own community and environment.
We'll come on to individual policy. We'll come on to that. Why are you the best man for the job overall, though? There are some very able candidates indeed. And also, it has to be said that, for the leader of a party, would it not be better to have a more, if you like, entrepreneurial sort of a spirit, as opposed to, is there not an argument to say you would be a fantastic candidate to be the looking after security, so far as that part is, I'm just saying, I'm playing devil's advocate.
Yeah, there's no reason why I can't look after security if I'm the leader of the party. There's no reason why that I can't set the policy agenda for security, defence, policing, counter-terrorism and so on if I'm the leader. There is no reason why not at all. However, the reason I joined this contest is because I was looking at the people who are lining up. You'll be aware, perhaps, Olly, I came into it slightly late in the day. And the reason was I saw that the people lining up to participate in the contest. And I thought, whilst there are some really good people there with a lot of strengths, there is nobody there who has the suite of experience and skills and the depth of those skills and experience to ensure that we can deliver on a broad platform driving forward towards Brexit and beyond. If you look at what is being asked of the next leader, it's actually a great deal more than was asked of Nigel. The next leader is not only going to have to project our politics into the UK political scene quite decisively, firmly, they're also going to have to reorganise the party and really bring its centre of gravity to Westminster, to the Westminster level of government. Now that's something that Nigel didn't really have to do. Nigel's focus was a one-issue focus, the referendum and winning the referendum, and the organisation of the party took second place. So you're asking a huge amount of this leader. So, and I honestly, when I look around the other candidates, I don't see that any of them have had the strategic leadership experience that I've got. And that's why I entered it, because it's critical, not only for the party, but for the country. And if I can say, Olly, you mentioned entrepreneurship. There's all sorts of different levels of entrepreneurship. You can talk about business entrepreneurship, sure. I'm not quite sure whether any of the candidates have really run a large national or international corporation. I've run an organisation with teams advising governments at the strategic level across 14 different countries. In fact, I put it together. And do we mean entrepreneurship, or do we need to talk about the ability to identify and define problems, define strategic solutions for them, and then design and lead an organisation to meet those strategic objectives? Now that, I mean, if you're doing that from scratch, if you're going to call that the sort of the entrepreneurship, if you want to use that word, that's needed to lead a political party at a national and international level, then I think I've got it. I don't see anybody else on the platform having it.
Okay, look, I'm going to get into some comments in just a minute because they're pouring in and some great questions.
I'm quite sure.
But I don't know if you know, we had John Rhys Evans on the show yesterday, the first of these interviews, and he was talking about the top-heavy power structure that resides in UKIP, and that basically, well, he's talking about direct democracy, which you brought up. Isn't it a good idea to bring the power to the grassroots?
I think there's two things, well, a lot of things about that, but first off, let's ask ourselves what the problem is. Is the problem that people, both within the party and within the country...
Matthew Outward, for example, says the people have been ignored for too long. He might not be talking about the party, but it's pretty endemic throughout public.
Yeah, no.
Carry on, sorry.
It's what I'm saying, Ollie. People in the party and people in the country have not had a voice in their own destiny. Now, there is a deficit of democracy in that, and there's certainly a deficit of communication in all directions, and a deficit in consultation. And if you want to lead, then you've got to involve people in the process. Now, how many team captains in football, this isn't a football team, I know, but would survive more than 5 minutes if they didn't talk to their team members? You've got to have that communication. It's been missing, and it's missing at the national level, and that's what I said earlier about the people giving people a voice. However, if you want to make every decision based upon a sort of purist approach to direct democracy and involve everybody, then you've got all sorts of issues, because who poses the questions? Who frames the questions? Because there's a huge amount of power there. Who provides oversight of that process? Where's the transparency there? And have we or have we not spent centuries, literally almost thousands of years, creating a democratic system which, although is now found to be very weak in some areas because of, I would say, a lack of experience in leadership at our senior levels in politics. Is the answer really to pull all of that down, and in the matter of a handful of years, maybe even a couple of years, just try and turn all that on its head and give everybody a say on every issue? And how do you transform from one to the other?
Well, they do something like it in Switzerland, for example.
Now, I agree.
Okay,
but
I'll throw something else in.
That's not the extent that's being discussed at the moment. I mean, that's at the local government level, mainly at the local government level, and it deals with things like future development. They've done it on immigration. There are some serious questions, but we've just had a referendum on the European Union, a year ago. Now, so we do have an element of that for the. Yeah,
but that was a fluke. We got that for a fluke. We only got that because Cameron thought he could throw the kitchen sink at it and win the thing, which he didn't.
Of course, and doesn't that prove that there is a role for these things? Absolutely, and I believe absolutely there is in local government. But I don't believe that you can hand every decision to the entire population to make to express itself on. Even if you look at the European Union referendum, there was, in numerical terms, there was a significant number of people in majority of leaving. However, we still see a country that needs to reconcile the fact that we're leaving. We've got divisions there. Now, are we going to have those divisions every time we have a direct democracy vote put to the entire country? And think back to what a simple question was posed in that referendum and how long it took to decide what the question should be. So what I'm saying to you, Ollie, is yes, there's a deficit of democracy. Yes, there's a deficit of internal communication and consultation at all levels in the party and in the nation. But no, I do not believe that a purist, full spectrum approach to direct democracy is a safe step to take in the first instance. I've said to John Rhys Evans that I believe that direct democracy is absolutely something that needs to be explored. It needs to be trialled. There needs to be a pilot project. And I suggested to him that that should be actually at a local government level. Now, he was non-committal in his response, but that's how I would approach it.
Okay. That's a pretty thorough answer, and I appreciate that. I've got some questions for you, and some statements from folks in the comments.
Yeah.
Daryl Goodlift says, Henry, I've seen your proposals for an administrative platform and have several concerns about non-members being employed by the party. We have a duty of care to our members and our targets for the left, as YI conference showed. Rodney Hughes, living in hope for Henry. Stephen Parry, Henry Bolton is the best person in the race. Jeannie Armstrong, focus on Brexit. Rodney Hughes, I'm extremely worried about the rise of Islam. Matthew Atwood, Islam is taking over and nothing is done. Matthew Atwood, again, the people have been ignored for far too long. Nicole Bushell has a question for HB, please. Currently, it seems we have very few members willing to volunteer for local by-elections and general canvassing. Many justify this by saying it will be better after the leadership contest. How will you encourage members to get active, and what support will there be for those of us trying hard to engage these people? Henry.
Oh, I've been trying to scribble down the questions there. I think you said it was Daryl asked about the platform.
Yes, he did. Yes.
Now, the platform itself is going to be apolitical, so it's purely functional. So people would be recruited not from the party. Now, of course, ideally they would become party members and would actually only want to work for the party if they support the party. But for the platform, we've got to remember, is purely functional. So it's procurement, it's human resources stuff, it's the logistics stuff, it's the administration. So it doesn't have a political role. So what we want is the most professional people who are prepared to come and work for us. Now, of course, they would have to sign up to a code of conduct and to the confidentiality clauses that would provide the means to make sure that's secure.
All right.
So the questions.
Okay, Henry, fair play. We get the gist with that. What about then encouraging grassroots for canvassing and stuff like that?
Okay.
I mean,
yeah, that was Nicole, I think.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's two things, if I may. One is that we as a party have been appallingly bad in recent years at preparing our candidates at every level for their campaigns. We've been incredibly bad at supporting them during their campaign, and we've then absolutely provided no support whatsoever once people are in office. So I think because there's two elements, there's the candidates and there's the activists, and I'll come on to that in a moment. I think that was the focus of Nicole's question. So I would very much want to retain the regional structure. In the regional structure, I would want to ensure that we have got a training team that is available to provide candidates at all levels with training in how to handle the media, training in party policy, party structures, the policies of other parties, and how to contact, how to address those in hustings and in discussions. And I would also want to see campaigning experts, real experts in campaigning, being on call at the regional level to provide support to campaigns. Now, that will provide greater expertise. In terms of the membership, I think the more, whichever political party you look at, I think there's quite a consistent correlation between the proportion of active members compared to the membership. And active members, people who are prepared to deliver leaflets and campaign. Now, what we need to do is we need to grow our membership. At the moment, branches don't have a great deal of motivation to maintain their membership. And that is partly because they don't get any benefit from it whatsoever. If you don't see a member, if they don't participate, there's still a benefit, and it's in the renewal subscription. I want every branch to be able to retain 15% of the renewal subscriptions for themselves. At the moment, when a member renews their subscription, all of that renewal fee goes to the central party funds. There is no motivation for the local branch to to keep that good relationship going with members. Now, it's our members who, and if we've got somebody actually actively looking after those members at the branch level, because there's an interest in the branch for doing so, then I hope we will retain more members, and the branch will get a fighting fund as a result. Now, more broadly, I think you will only get members into the party if you instill in the population generally a belief that UKIP actually is relevant, is doing stuff, and doing stuff that people believe that they can support or that they want to support. And if one's entirely honest, the party has delivered very little, has said very little, certainly since the general election. There is no reason why anybody would join the UKIP at the moment. It's not doing anything. So the first thing we've got to do is get very active at all levels. And the leader needs to be leading from the front and doing it.
Okay. Carl Dean Pearson, you read his mind and basically answered half his question, but he also wants to know, how will you entertain Scottish voters, as they have extremely little interest in UKIP and see us as having no chance of winning, so why vote? This is extremely frustrating for candidates and members, including myself.
Yeah.
I was able to stand, but came dead last with 1.6% of the vote, or 604 votes. So he didn't even get his deposit back, did he?
Well,
or did he? Oh, yeah, he did, maybe.
Oh, he did, yeah, you did, yeah.
You did.
I think one of the first things that I will do if elected as leader is I am going to go on a grand tour, because during the hustings, and very unfortunately there was no hustings held in or organised in Scotland, which I think was a flaw. But don't get me on to how hustings were organised, please. But I would want to go on a grand tour because I want to reverse the process. Rather than me telling everybody about me and why I think I'd be good as the leader, I want to hear from everybody else. I want to ask the questions, and I want to know what they think will work. But let me throw a few of my ideas. Sorry, I didn't scribble down his name, the chap who asked the question about Scotland.
It was Carl. It was Carl.
Carl, I would... this might sound a little bit sort of niche, but I have a military background, and I know that the Scottish regiments, for example, have, whilst all being amalgamated into the Royal Scots, have Black Watch and so on, have all managed to retain their own kind of identity, should we say informally. I'd want to not break them up again, but I would like to separate them out. So I would like to bring back the traditional Scottish regiments that have served the British Army so well for so many years, for centuries. I see no good reason for bundling all of the old regiments together. And I believe, in Scotland, the amalgamation process was bitterly fought and lost. If I ever have the influence to reverse that and to re-establish the old Scottish regiments, believe me, I will. As for other issues relating to Scotland, I'm all ears. Let me know.
Okay, a couple of points from Stephen Parry, quite interesting. We had direct democracy in the EU referendum, and those who are not listened to are now. But you cannot on every issue, major infrastructure and defence, e.g. Trident, but not everything. That's his opinion. Brexit is the primary concern, he also says. After that is delivered, the other issues will fall into place. If we elect a candidate where race is the biggest issue, we miss the point of UKIP. I mean, I have to say, that to me is an argument that it's one of the underlying arguments of this entire campaign, it seems to me. Would you not agree?
I would. And the members are obviously internally an exercise in direct democracy, isn't it?
I may be wrong. This is a bit of an opinion here. Yeah, but sorry, carry on.
It's an opinion I have as well. I believe that if we want to deliver Brexit, and if we want to deliver future prosperity and security and our future our way of life, protect our way of life and our own culture, then we have to have the ear and the trust of the people of Great Britain writ large, and I'm sorry to say it, but of the media of all sorts. And that might, people may label me an establishment figure for it, but I tell you what, if you can't communicate, if nobody listens to you because they think you're an extremist, because they've got whatever prejudices they have, you are never going to get traction on a serious strategic level. So, having said that, immigration is a massive problem. We're having to effectively create infrastructure, accommodation and so on for the equivalent of the population of Wolverhampton or Hull every year at the moment. We're cutting back on policing, we're cutting back on, in real terms, on the NHS, we're cutting back on expenditure for local government. This is simply not sustainable. And at the same time, the rate of immigration, particularly of some of the Islamic culture, I would say, let's call it what it is such that our own way of life, or that we can't assimilate it into Britain. Now, Britain is a country going back thousands of years of immigrants, but we've always managed new migration into the country by virtue of the fact that it's been relatively, or the numbers have been low enough for an assimilation to take place. Now,
how much assimilation do you think we have, and how much does it feel like infiltration? And I'll draw you. Okay, I'll put in another trigger word for you: Saudi Arabia.
Well, I've already said quite publicly that I would ban all funding from Wahhabi sources or other suspect sources for independent schools. I want to see all imams trained and funded and licensed in this country. I don't want to see, for example, a Pakistani imam coming over here to preach. They don't know our society, they don't know our culture, they don't know our history, I want to see the same practices as effectively are applied to a Church of England vicar, applied to imams preaching in the UK.
Should we somehow sanction Saudi Arabia? I mean, for example, should we refuse to sell them arms that they then go and kill their neighbours in Yemen?
If you want a simple answer, no, we shouldn't be selling them arms. The geopolitics of that region is such that the spillover from let's face it, the Saudis in some respects are managing the conflict, not in the way that I would like to see them do it, I have to say. But the Middle East could still go horribly, horribly wrong. And we need to retain some influence. I don't believe that arming Saudi Arabia, and particularly given some of the horrific incidents that have occurred in Yemen, the Saudi hands, I'm very uncomfortable with the way we're doing things, and I think we need to look again at how we exercise influence there. We keep doing things by proxy in various parts of the world, and that absolves the government of direct blame if something goes wrong, which I'm afraid in Whitehall there's all too little political courage. Then they're very risk averse. The second thing is that we do not at the moment have sufficient resources ourselves to, if we wish to project military force into some of these regions effectively. And I think that opens up the whole debate about our defence structure and defence expenditure. And again, you could there's a segue into why is it that the British government offered to put British military personnel and assets under European Union command a couple of weeks ago. It's all part and parcel of the same storyboard, that they want to cut costs by pooling resources and getting others to do our job for us, which I don't think is effective.
Do you agree with the view that rogue states such as Saudi Arabia and Qatar are funding ISIS, and the allegations that Al-Qaeda in the first place was a CIA construct?
No, I don't accept that Al-Qaeda was a CIA construct. However, a lot of CIA capabilities found their way into Al-Qaeda in the early days. So I see why people draw a connection there. But it was not a planned connection. It was another one of these lack of strategic vision and foresight type of actions that both the UK and the US seem to have a habit of getting involved with.
I'm genuinely fascinated to hear your opinion on this. It is. We do.
Maybe
carry on,
Olly,
Henry.
Just to go back to the previous bit about Yemen and Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
Yes, of course, there's funding through a number of channels to to Islamic State and to other groups around the world, in fact, not just in Syria and Iraq. So there is a significant problem there. What you've got is a rather two-faced type of nation there. You've got, in both cases, you've got an educated elite running the country who know very well how to say the right things to the Western leadership, and then you've got a powerful religious element that have their own method of funding, which the government turns a blind eye to. So you've got all sorts of things going on. It's a difficult one to unpack, and I simply would say this: we are probably not going to be able to stop them from pursuing funding because of their religious association.
So, however, for example, you're suggesting that it's a theocratic part of the Saudi Arabian establishment that is maybe more interested in backing, if you like, the Saudification of Europe, you could argue.
There's not quite, because it's not that the government is separate from it, but the leadership is part and parcel of it. It's just that they're slightly more sophisticated in dealing with the West, and therefore Western diplomats, Western leaders are susceptible to their messaging and their guarantees and their assurances that they're going to behave in a way that we'd like them to, because they know that that's how they're going to lead us along. I think we need to stop doing things by proxy, and we need to stop our own reliance for influence being through countries such as Saudi and Qatar.
What do you think our relationship with Russia should be in this struggle? Because, I mean, they've actually been helping to protect us, and Hillary Clinton, for example, was talking about a no-fly zone over Syria, which would have meant that we would have had less protection from potential extremists coming into Europe. Is that not fair to say?
Очень трудно вопрос. I speak Russian. I know the Russians very well. I work with the Russian government and security forces quite closely. And my wife is Russian. So if the FBI ever accused the leader of UKIP of having associations with the Russian Federation, they're going to be right. In the West, we don't know how to deal with the Russians. The Russians are not Europeans. They do not work in diplomatic terms or political terms along the lines of the West, or certainly not the European Union. And I think European leaders are really stumped as to how to deal with the Russians. Well, they just need to learn that the Russians say what they think, and you can say what you think to the Russians, and they'll respect you a great deal more for it. I once had a very senior level meeting with a deputy minister level individual in Moscow. I was there with a very senior, not British, but a very senior ambassador, and after 2 minutes of the senior ambassador waffling away in good diplomatic speak, the Russian turned around and said, "I don't want to listen to you, I want to listen to him because he knows what he's talking about," meaning me, which was very undiplomatic. But they have no time for this sort of pussyfooting around the issue and smooth talking. If you've got something to say it. And Western diplomats aren't very comfortable with that sort of environment. So that's the first thing. We need to learn that the Russians are different to us. But I think they can be a good ally in certain areas. But we must appreciate that they work to their own agenda, as we do, as we should do.
Do you agree that we're seeing war profiteering and unfair trade, which is devastating cultures abroad, which is precisely what is creating the migration crisis, and that we have to tackle the war profiteering and the unfair trade? And actually, the EU is a protectionist racket for that. But, I mean, in terms of the war profiteering, how much of that would you agree with, and how much do you think that's, if you like, a conspiracy theory?
I'm going to ask for clarification on your question, Olly. Do you mean that we're quite happy to turn a blind eye to fueling conflict, and maybe the Russians are as well?
In exchange for profit, which is what Eisenhower warned us about, for example, the military-industrial complex. And it seems to be going on galore. I don't know. You tell me. Or is that a myth?
I agree. I know, I agree. And I think we've just talked about Saudi, and the humanitarian catastrophe that is Yemen is partly what it is because of what we have, because we wanted to make money out of Saudi Arabia. There are parts of Africa that are suffering in exactly the same way, and I have to say, not so much from British arms sales, but from arms sales from other European member states. And we see a similar thing going on in parts of the world with the Russians, yes, and the Americans. Of course, this is the problem. The defence architecture that we've got, in terms of technical architecture, is built to a degree on the profits that come from exactly that sort of exploitation. It is morally reprehensible.
So you would push to change that, or would you seek to basically enforce migration at home, for example, instead?
Well, if we think about so now, okay, we've got a segue now from that to immigration.
Yeah.
The population of Africa, by some UN estimates, is due to double by 2050. Okay, so we've got what? Where are we now? 2017. We've got what? 33 years, and that's a hell of a lot of people with dwindling resources and governments that aren't prepared to put any investment into building those resources up, agriculture, water, and so on. These are all. Where's that population going to go? It's going to come towards us. Of course it is, and it's also there's going to be conflict over those resources. I have no doubt whatsoever. And into that mix is exactly what you've just talked about: is Western arms sales and indeed Russian arms sales. So we've got a perfect storm brewing down there, and we've got a European Union that is unable to secure its external borders and unwilling to secure its internal ones. So it's all going to be heading our way. Plus, the Middle East is still a basket case, and I think it's going to be a lot longer. So what we need to do, I think, is we need to actually be a bit bolder about our whole approach here. We need to understand that there are corrupt regimes, there's organised crime, there's a whole and there are military organisations and paramilitary organisations that are beholden to no one, and all of these things.
Monsanto or Blackwater.
We've got a whole load of things going on, and the bottom line, as far as the West is concerned, is profit and a wish not to engage in any political risk whatsoever. And we're going to pay the price for this shortly. I think a much bolder approach and a much more effective one would be to go after organised crime, that people smugglers, with military force. I think the immigration problem that they are in part encouraging and creating is an existential threat, not just to the UK but to our friends and allies.
The which courts? I think we need military courts?
No.
Excuse me. I didn't hear that.
What I was saying is that we need to go after the people smuggling,
right?
The people smugglers, the organised crime,
yep.
With military capabilities.
Right.
They are an existential threat to, or they are helping to create an existential threat to the European Union broadly, our friends and allies, and most importantly to the UK. And now we need to do something called upstreaming. We need to deal with the problem further upstream. We need to deal with it in Africa. Now, if we're prepared to go after the Taliban in Afghanistan and
yes.
Islamic State in Syria and Iraq, well, I think we should be going after the guys who are funding those sort of causes, but at the same time are encouraging poor people, to sell their few goats and move out in order to get up to Libya and cross the Mediterranean and come to the European Union and to the UK. Now, I think those people are an evil blight for both the people that they are exploiting, but they are also a threat to us, and I think we need to go after them. Now, I think also we need to start leaning on governments around the world that are causing this in the first place, through prejudice, through various places where we're seeing it even in Myanmar now, with the Rohingya Muslims being kicked out. And there are all manner of these things, and we are doing absolutely diddly squat about it.
That's right.
But you know what? Ultimately, all these people are going to start they're already seeking refuge here, and we can't cope with it.
Okay, I've got a few questions for you. from our splendid commentators, and I'm sorry, there's quite a few lined up here. Jeannie Armstrong would like to know, Henry, would you push to have police powers of discretion restored?
Not quite sure what she means. Police powers of discretion.
Is that stop and search discretion? I'm not sure what's going on there.
A police officer, I used to be a police officer, and there are certain offences for which, low-level offences for which a police officer in my day did have discretion. You act in the public interest, and your prime purpose is to preserve life and property. And unlike a European police officer who is looking for tools, can't do anything unless the law says that they can do something, a British police officer can act, and I believe they still can act, in theory. I'll explain that in a moment. They still can act in the interests of whoever they're dealing with. So there is still a power of discretion for minor offences. Now, I think what she's talking about is, has that discretionary power been, in effect, overruled by political correctness at higher levels in the police? I would say absolutely yes. Now, there are some very, very professional senior police officers around. However, the prevalent attitude is that if you create a problem, it's going to come back, a political problem, then it's going to come back and bite you. And that is not really the fault of the police officers. That's the fault of our political leaders who have failed to stand by the proper enforcement of the rule of law. In addition, we've had, and I personally blame a lot of it on this, in the 90s we had a phase of accelerated promotion for police officers. And many, not all, but many of the police officers who were part of that programme grew up wanting to climb the ladder rather than serve the public. And they have become very politically astute movers and shakers, and are now at assistant chief constable level, and their whole life has been about avoiding creating problems or creating waves. Now, of course, if you go to police, particularly an immigrant community, then there are all sorts of people who are going to stand up and cry foul, unreasonably so. But that creates a political problem, and these folk don't want to create political problems for themselves. It looks bad on their record, so they are not encouraging of police officers to do their full job.
Are you alluding, for example, to Rochdale, where the top cop is now an MP?
I'm not going to name names.
What do you think of that? I mean, really? I mean, he basically he ignored what was going on with
absolutely
1,000 girls, 1,400.
No, absolutely. Look, if a police officer,
more or less, you know what I'm saying. He's an MP.
Let's be principled about this. If a police officer has been found to be negligent in that way or culpable in that way, in failing to act, failing to protect the public, then that individual should absolutely not hold public office. That individual should feel the weight of the law themselves. And I believe that there is a police officer, when I was policing, and I actually don't know the answer to this question, a police officer was required by law to enforce the law. Now, if a police officer is not doing that, then why aren't we taking action against them in a stronger manner? No, absolutely. There's somebody who's been involved in such a thing should not be holding public office anywhere, let alone Western.
Is there a problem with masonry in the police and with British politics?
I honestly don't know, Olly. I'm not a Mason. I've never been asked to join the Masons, and I honestly don't know. I mean, when I was a police officer, it was always rumoured to be the case, but I can't answer that with any knowledge.
Okay, all right, okay, fair enough. Rodney Hughes asks, are you in favour of HS2?
No, absolutely not. No. If we were a massively wealthy country and we didn't have food banks and we didn't have, we weren't closing doctor surgeries, and if we could afford to put aeroplanes on our aircraft carriers, then I might say, well, yes, we've got a bit of spare cash over for a few vanity projects and so on. No, we have got so many other priorities that this is just crazy. And no, I mean, there's nothing more to be said about it. It's not going to deliver any meaningful results. It's going to upset a lot of people, and it's going to use up a whole lot of cash. And I do not buy into the idea that big infrastructure projects boost the economy. I think that's absolute tosh. If the government's got, I've even seen the figure of 200 billion for HS2 now. That's the highest figure I've seen estimated. Now, if the government's got £200 billion to spend on a railway track, then it's got 200 billion to spend on other things. And it doesn't actually matter whether it's spent on a railway or whether it's spent on putting aeroplanes on aircraft carriers or putting more money into the NHS. It's still money into the economy. So I do not buy it that an infrastructure project like that is actually going to boost our economy. I think it's just a fancy way of selling it.
You think it's a white elephant? You don't think it would help the north, and you don't think it would help to decongest the southeast?
No, I don't. No, because where is the infrastructure for it to mesh into? I mean, I'm speaking to you here from Austria, and here and in Germany, the public transport system is all integrated. Your bus routes, your underground routes, your tram routes, your train routes, your airports, it's all fully integrated and it works. Back in the UK, we have this appalling habit of saying, right, we're going to build a new railway or a new motorway and think it fixes the problem. It doesn't. It actually creates a bigger problem because you end up with bottlenecks. So, what the country needs is, and each region in the country, it needs a proper, comprehensive, strategic transport strategy, linking all these things up. Our rail, our airports, our underground, our trains, our trams, our buses. At the moment, what we've done, all of these things exist in little isolated boxes, and we've not got any strategic overview whatsoever of our national transport infrastructure. So, just putting in an extra railway isn't going to help us. No, I don't believe that. Plus, the other thing is that one of the experiences, I think, that people will talk about in terms of motorways is that a lot of the towns along the route that are bypassed by such a route are going to lose out because people no longer stop there. There's no longer a junction. So you can go from A to B, but you're missing out, however many places in the middle who no longer get the benefit of passing traffic. Now, some may be happy with that because it's environmentally friendly for them and it takes stuff off the roads. But if we're talking about the economy, those places are being bypassed.
Okay, all right. Just a few comments from a few folks. Michael Green says, I was a police firearms instructor for 18 years. I would not trust every police officer with a firearm. Just a few comments hanging around the...
Nor would I.
Okay. Chris Ford cuts out or suggests that the travel time will be cut by 20 minutes.
Yeah, right.
Mark Child... We're gone. Yep, carry on.
12 to 20 minutes. I mean, that's a bloody expensive bill to pay for a 12 to 20 minute faster rail journey, isn't it?
I think in terms of productivity, you need to multiply it by the number of journeys and all that sort of stuff to work it out, don't you? But nonetheless, we can modernise our existing trains for much less, says Mark Childs, who's I thought was going to be joining us on the show, but he hasn't called in, but that's fine. Daryl says, not required to win at politics. I've not... Okay, I think there's a spat going on between some of our folks and the... okay, that's fine. Jeannie Armstrong, yes, masonry is rife. Stephen Parry, one thing that needs to be eased back is the deluge of political correctness that is washing over the country. We need a citizens' charter who everyone stands by and all immigrants must accept before entry. Okay, yeah. Political correctness. Go.
Well, hi, Olly. I am here, I would just say. I've been waiting.
All right, Mark. Well, look, if you want to chip in with a comment, you're very welcome. But what do you think? Political correctness, well, I mean, how endemic is this? I mean, it's truth, for crying out loud, the kind of modern model of political correctness that we actually see was practiced by Goebbels. What do you think?
Well, look, I mean, political correctness, I mean, the world's gone absolutely barking mad, isn't it? We need to be able to express our opinions. Now, I'm not one for saying that it's permissible or it should be permissible for people to go out of their way with the sole purpose of insulting or offending people. That is not politically correct, and it's not even decent or good manners.
No, it's not decent. Common decency, eh?
Yeah. Where's all that gone? But but expressing an opinion. If I've got an opinion about immigration, if I've got an opinion about crime, if I've got an opinion about the way the NHS is working or not working, then I should be free to express it. And what seems to have happened to me, Ollie, is that there has been an extremist, and I'm going to call it an extremist left element, that liberal left, that have...
The Antifa, you could argue.
Yeah, absolutely, who are telling us that we can't open our mouths. And to be honest, very disappointingly, I've seen it in this leadership contest. Not between candidates, I have to say, but online, the number of people who've turned around and said, that you don't have a right to say this or you shouldn't be saying that, when people are just expressing an opinion, and if they're in UKIP, God help us. I mean, we need to be able to free to express our opinion, to trigger decent, well-behaved debate, but nonetheless enter into that debate with the opinions we have. We've got a proud tradition of that in UKIP, and I stand by it absolutely 100%. But I do not stand by somebody who is deliberately trying to insult somebody else. And I think we do need to address the fact that the left seem to be immune to this. It is the left that are telling us what we can and cannot say. It is the left who are saying what is politically correct and what is not. We need to push back on that. We need to push back hard, and we need to push back fast. I'm going to stand up and say what the hell I want, but I'm not going to offend anybody doing it.
We have got one or two people asking what your views are, for example, on Sharia law, which is obviously in this kind of territory.
I mean, in terms of Sharia law itself, I don't believe, and I've looked at this, I do not believe that Sharia law. We've got to, if we're going to recognise what the problem is and therefore solve it, we've got to really look at it. Sharia law occurs at all sorts of levels in amongst a Muslim community, from a very moderate, very easygoing kind of dispute resolution to actually judgments and imposed solutions to problems within the community. Now, there is Sharia courts, in my view, are absolutely incompatible with British common law system, incompatible frequently with British law as enacted in Parliament, and incompatible with human rights. So I do not want to see any Sharia law courts. Now, we have a practical problem, and I'll be interested to hear from anybody who's got a solution to this. But outlawing Sharia courts will be very difficult it'll be very difficult to enforce. What we need to do is make absolutely 100% certain that everybody in this country understands that Sharia law there is only one law in this country, and that's the law as enacted in Parliament, and law stemming from that. Sharia law itself has absolutely no legal or moral authority in this country under British law. Now, we need to be very, very clear on that. So that's where I stand on Sharia law.
All right. What about halal? Because I know that I'm not going to go through this entire list, because frankly, you've already explained it really with your explanation with Sharia law. But I did want to ask you about halal, because one thing, just as an aside, I kind of think we need to debate how we treat animals, and halal is pretty cruel.
Yeah. I am going to just say one thing. Sharia police.
Yeah. Oh, no-go zones.
That needs to be a criminal offence. Trying to publicly enforce Sharia law, for me, should be a criminal offence, and the police should treat it as such. Now, halal. I absolutely am opposed to the non-stun killing of animals. However, I fully agree with one of my other contestants in this leadership campaign, with John, who you had on last night.
Yes.
We also need to address the, if you like, the birth to death treatment of animals. It's not just about being humane in death, it's about being humane throughout the entire life cycle of that animal.
Yeah.
And I think we need to have that broader conversation. Now, I'm also going to say something else to you, Ollie. I have never myself been I've seen animals, goats and sheep, slaughtered, actually, rather worryingly, in 2 cases in my honour. I've seen that happen, and it's an unpleasant thing, and you do see the suffering that animals go through. But what I have not done is visit any sort of slaughterhouse in the UK, and I feel not at all that I want to, but this is such an important discussion amongst some of our members that if I'm elected leader, even if I'm not, I will seek to do so, because I want to see for myself how they're actually run, how it actually works. But to answer the simple question, I'm opposed to non-stun slaughter, and I think we absolutely need to have that debate, as John has said, about how we treat animals.
Okay, so you're clearly not shy to debate these things. Look, I want to ask you a bit about Brexit now, and just a few, just a few very brief points. What do you think about this divorce bill?
I don't see. A bit of background. I worked in Brussels for just over 3 years, well, nearly 4 years actually, as Chief Planner for Common Security and Defence Policy, working in the heart of Brussels at a relatively senior level. I don't see any legal justification for us paying Brussels anything. Now, there may be, there are some programmes that we have agreed to that will be ongoing after we've left the European Union. Now, there is a legitimate discussion to be had, particularly from the European Union side, as to whether or not, having agreed to them and having signed up to the budgets for these activities, these projects, these programmes, whether the UK should actually continue paying towards them until their end date. That's a legitimate discussion that needs to be part of the negotiations. But a divorce bill or some sort of, plugging of the EU budget hole that results from us leaving, there is no legal basis for that whatsoever, in my view, and we shouldn't be paying a thing for that reason.
What did you think about what Boris wrote in the Telegraph?
Boris's whole thrust was about we've got to make this work for Britain, and I'm 100% signed up for that.
It's thrown a bit of a cat amongst the pigeons, hasn't it? Just out of interest, your bit of political insight I'm looking for here. What do you think that does in terms of May's speech on Friday?
The cabinet meeting that took place today was, I think it was over 2 hours, which is a great deal longer than normal. I suspect they were thrashing exactly that point out.
Yeah, damn, to have been a fly on the wall.
It would have been fascinating, wouldn't it? I think Boris, his primary goal is to shake the government up and say, and fire a warning shot across May's bows and say, you know what, if we're going to do this, we need to do it properly. And I'm with him on that. Do I think that May is going to be is going to listen to that? She will listen to it, but I don't think it'll knock her off much from what she was originally going to say. And I think what we're going to get is the Prime Minister trying to kickstart negotiations on the basis of, look, this is what we'll do for you if you start doing stuff for us. And I think that's why we're hearing these stories of £20 billion payment. Now, the problem the government's got is that it's not negotiating in a way that Brussels understands. And if we look at the position papers that are going out, they're almost briefing papers for David Davis. They're not statements of the British position. These position papers that we're submitting, the latest one was 4 days ago or something, 3-4 days ago, that we're submitting to Brussels, are simply we think that X, Y, and Z is working well, and we'd like to keep it going, and we think we should apply these principles to whatever agreement we have. Now, the Brussels approach will be their response will be one of frustration, and they will say, well, okay, what exactly are you proposing? Where is your draft agreement? You want a treaty on security cooperation? Well, show us a draft of that, and then we've got something to discuss on. Because, of course, we can agree that cooperation is good. That's all you're saying in this position paper. So that's not the basis for negotiation. So I think we have a real problem with the way that the negotiations are going on. We're not negotiating. We're just stating the bleeding obvious to Brussels and getting nowhere.
Do you think we will get a deal, or do you think that it's just going to be... this is just a bit of a joke, really? It's just not going to happen. The EU just isn't going to do anything sensible.
The way we're going at the moment, we won't have an agreement, is my view. If the British government suddenly puts on the table, this is our proposed security cooperation treaty as a draft. This is our proposal for access to the customs union and the single market. This and a concrete paper that's a draft of what ultimately would be signed off on. Then we'd get somewhere. But the British government simply is not negotiating in that way, and as a result, we're very unlikely to get an agreement. And I think very, very soon, the European Union side is going to get bored and frustrated with the whole thing, and they won't be receptive to proper negotiation anyway. I think at the moment, if I would put it at about 15% chance of getting an agreement. What worries me, Ollie, is that nothing is being done for what happens if we don't get an agreement, or indeed what happens when we leave. There is an assumption, a prevailing assumption in Whitehall, that it will all work out okay.
They're not planning for a transition at all, are they? They're not planning for hard Brexit and going into WTO rules. They're not planning for it. It came out this week.
Absolutely not. They're absolutely not. And so that puts us in an incredibly weak position in terms of negotiating, and it creates another risk. The risk of leaving the European Union is not leaving the customs union, the clutches of the ECJ, or leaving the single market. The risk of leaving the European Union is a total and utter failure of the British government to prepare for it and plan for it. Now,
is it the British government, or is it the civil service, or is it in cahoots, or what? Because it seems to me the civil service is just failing miserably here.
It's both. And in a sort of twist of an ironic twist, really, the civil service, because the normal pattern of events in the decision making at the national level is Prime Minister goes off to the heads of government meeting in Brussels. They agree whatever they agree. They discuss whatever they discuss. Prime Minister comes back, holds a cabinet meeting, tells everybody, right, this is what we discussed, this is what we agreed, so I need you and you to go away and do X, Y, and Z. So the ministers from the cabinet go back to their government departments, call in their senior civil servants and say, right, this is Prime Minister was in Brussels, they discussed this, they agreed that, so we've got to do X, Y, and Z. Now, in that environment, the civil service becomes an implementing arm, and certainly is not an environment in which anybody wants a civil servant to stand up and say, but wouldn't it be better if we did it this way? Because you can't go back and change it. So the civil service has become an administrative and implementation branch, and it isn't properly informing ministers. It's not identifying problems, and it's certainly not in the business of problem solving. So we have a massive problem in terms of the institutional culture and the capability of the civil service to support ministers. And then ministers don't have the leadership. Now, if we're talking now, we loop this back round to the UKIP situation. Now, that's the level of leadership we need. If UKIP wants to be a serious player, UKIP needs somebody who can sit down at that strategic level and actually lead and say, this is what we're going to do. Now, there's no government minister that has the confidence to do that at the moment. And what we need is somebody who's got the nous and the experience to do that. Now, I would also say that in this sits a huge opportunity for our party, because we can be the ones who actually, we've got huge experience and knowledge in our party. Huge, massive. And what we need to do is mobilise that and involve that and start contributing to the national debate on Brexit in a constructive manner. We need to be not just protesting, we're not out yet, when are we getting out, but actually saying, this is what we need to be doing at our borders. This is what we need to be doing about trade. This is what we need to be doing about cooperation on security and defence and all, the whole range of things. And we need to be doing that. Now, I don't care if the government picks up our policies and applies them, if it means that we're going to get a good Brexit and we're going to propel this country's future in a positive way. I do care if we sit back and we focus on some other issue rather than getting this right. Because you know what? If we don't get Brexit right, we are all going to be regretting it for generations to come. We have to, and this party has a moral responsibility to make sure it happens.
Okay. Are there any circumstances at all under which you would accept some kind of a transition deal?
Yes. And now it's going back a little bit, Olly, to what we just said.
Yeah.
If we want to prepare for leaving the customs union, it is going to take us a great deal more than the time we've got left for negotiation. That's a sad fact. We could have done it had the government started.
Very likely.
Well, with borders, I mean, if we decided to pull the plug and just go and leave tomorrow, then we would have unholy chaos on our borders. Because we're still implementing cuts to border force, which are about 32% in all. We're still implementing them. We're leaving the customs union. Wake up, Whitehall. What the hell is going on? We've got to start planning for the day that we leave. It's not been done, and I'm afraid the planning and the preparation will take time to implement. So I think now we're in a situation where a transition period, but if for no other reason, the management of our borders is going to be needed. But every day that we waste on this is a day longer for that transition period. And it's very worrying, because the European Union are going to keep their claws in us as long as they can, and they're going to be hoping that we get another general election and we get another leadership or another prime minister who's going to have a very different view to things than the Conservatives even. And if UKIP's not there fighting the corner, we're going to be in a sorry state, right? So we need to mobilise ourselves and get serious about it again.
Okay, I'm getting some comments that are vehemently disagreeing with you about the transitional period, I have to tell you. Transitional period is a ruse. But he also says we've to be tough with the EU bullies. Look, there's a few. Bolton accepts transition deal, says Darryl Goodliffe. The deal that the establishment want to use to force us to stay in the EU, he means. What would you say to these guys?
I say that, I've already said, that is a massive risk. Now, look, there are a number of ways that we can sort out our borders. We could mobilise our extremely small armed forces to support our border force. We could use the Navy to look more. We've got 19 major surface vessels, so it's not many, and most of those aren't at sea. But we could mobilise what we've got to start securing our borders. But even that needs a bit of planning and preparation. And if we haven't got it together, then just pulling the plug is going to lead to chaos, and it's going to be horrific. What I'm saying,
we've got members of the armed forces we could help to protect the borders.
That's what I'm just saying. Yeah. So, but none of this, and I'm saying it to you, and I'm saying to
that was a question, actually. It sounded like a statement, but it was really a question.
We have. If we choose to do it, and at the moment there seems to be no political will to do it. And what I'm saying, I don't want a transition period. Good Lord, I want to say. I mean, this is why I'm in UKIP, and I've seen Brussels from the inside. The sooner we are out of it, the better. And your listeners are absolutely correct. There's a huge risk in a transition period, and I've already acknowledged that. But what I'm saying is that under the present trajectory, there's no choice. What we need to do is start thinking radically differently. We need to say, what do we need on our borders to manage it if we don't have an agreement? If we want to pull the plug at the earliest possible moment, when can we have the relevant assets on our borders, and where are we going to find them? Now, I can tell you that nobody in government, nobody in Whitehall is asking those questions. And before we can say when we're going to pull the plug, we have to have answers to those questions. Because otherwise, I tell you what, all those folk from Calais are going to come across here, and there's going to be an almighty... Everything's going to be a chaos. And we don't want that. That is not the way to start our future as Great Britain. We need to get this right. So let's.
Well, it would be
thinking
appalling if we fell out with the EU so poorly that we couldn't maintain some sense of security between us. But okay. Let's leave that. I want to ask you about something slightly different. EFTA, because a lot of people are saying, you know, if we have to pay, let me read you something that I read yesterday. I can't remember who it was, but I thought it was an interesting point. EFTA members must pay to be members of the European Economic Area. But it looks like we're going to have to pay somewhere in the region of, well, this person says 30 billion to leave anyway. So let's pay it as an EFTA EEA fee. Seems sensible, and everyone can claim credit for sorting out a thorny issue, our divorce settlement. That seems a bit short-sighted to me in terms of the maths. But on the other hand, would you consider EFTA?
No, I wouldn't consider EFTA. I mean, the problem with EFTA is that it still ties us in to the European Union.
Yes.
And, you know, at what point are we going to say we do not want the European Court to have supremacy over us? Now, if for me, that is massive. If a country has elements of its law that are subordinate to another court that is effectively politically appointed by an organisation that we won't have any influence over, then you know, we're not getting out of the European Union. So no, I'm not. Simple answer: I don't want us to go into EFTA.
Okay. Question from Darryl Goodliff again. There are lots of points about the transitional period, and I think this is do you accept the Labour Party's formulation on a transitional period? As short as possible, but as long as necessary.
No. Look, you know, what's that mean?
Well, exactly. I mean, this is it, isn't it? The whole transitional route is, in a way, is it not just better to say, we'll go on WTO rules and take it from there? You know, and we're going to get trade deals. Canada wants to do, you know, mini CETA with us, they said the other day. I don't know whether we should do that, by the way. I didn't like the look of CETA any more than TTIP, or, you know, but also Japan, the US. I mean, in terms of trade, it's not an issue. If we could organize our forces, and you know what? I mean, we have done it in the past. We've managed to turn a trick here and there where we've needed to in terms of securing the country. If we could do that, then in terms of the trade, it's fine. Europe, guess what? The Germans are still going to want to trade with us. So are the French, all the rest of it. No, you know, the EU is basically blown out of the water because instead of them being relevant, the middlemen, we've got the industry leaders behind saying, let's just get on with it. And yeah, of course, we need to try and, you know, secure the place. Europe as a whole.
Olly, you know, I don't think this is rocket science. If I was the Prime Minister, you know what, I'd get people in and I'd say, right, worst case scenario, we have no agreement and we're going. Okay, what do we need to have on our borders to make it work? What other things do we need in place? Okay, come back to me with answers. Okay, you get your list of answers. How long is it going to take to put these things in place? You know, this is very, very...
This is where the civil service, as you yourself have basically said, need to be pre-planning. Huh?
Yeah, absolutely. And the Prime Minister and ministers need to be kicking their backsides to get it done.
Absolutely.
And that's an issue of leadership.
Okay.
Now, so they need to be sent off, get me these answers, or find yourself another job, effectively. Get me these answers. I want to know what we need to have on those borders, and I need to know where we're going to get it from. Come up with options for me, and all the, you know, yes, the associated costs, and if we're taking something from here, you know, to put over there, how much, what disruption does that cause? I want to know all that, of course, but only by going through that process can we figure out a date as to when we can actually pull out. Now, you know, because then we can start putting the right things in place. We know what they are, we know where we're going to get them from, and we can start sort of reorganising based on that. But if we haven't even asked those questions yet, which we haven't, nobody has, then, you know, yes, of course, you know, when people are talking about a transition period, there's not going to be any particular length of time because nobody's got an answer. Nobody's asked the question. And this, to me, is the biggest scandal of the whole thing. And it doesn't matter whether it's Labour, Conservatives, Lib Dems. Well, Lib Dems are clearly not interested in this at all. Or worryingly,
now,
UKIP.
yes. Now,
UKIP
you used to be a Lib Dem. Huh.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. Yeah, I did.
Okay, square that circle quickly for us.
I believe in good old-fashioned liberalism in as much as
but they don't.
You can do what you want so long as you don't do harm to others. You know, the liberal governments of the end of the 1800s were some of the toughest governments that Britain has ever known. And we had stronger armed forces than any other time, and so on as well. They were tough. Okay, the Liberal Democrats of today, I'm afraid, have gone down the route which I cannot accept, of not only supporting the European Union, but coming up with this whole kind of concept that seemingly, to me, that society owes everything to the individual and the individual owes nothing to society. I totally disagree with that. I think, yes, society needs to support the individual, but the individual has a duty to the community and the greater interest. There's no question about that in my mind. And so the Liberal Democrats absolutely are not home for me for two extremely important reasons, and they haven't been for a long time. Now, but I'd also remind people that Churchill was a Liberal at one point.
Yeah, he was. Crossed over.
Yes, absolutely. As have I.
Okay, all right. Are there any of your fellow folks, bidding for the leadership that you would not work with under any circumstances? And are there any circumstances in which you'd even leave the party?
Are there any circumstances under which I would leave the party? I very much hope not. And I don't see that that's going to be the case. So I don't know of any circumstances that I see on the horizon that are likely to lead to me leaving the party. No. Is there anybody that I would not work with under any circumstances? No, there's nobody that I would not work with under any circumstances. Now, there are some people that if I was going to work with them, I would want to have quite a detailed conversation. There are other people who I've already had conversations with. So I'll leave it at that, Ollie. Okay,
all right. Mark, have you got anything to say? Because you just haven't piped in at all. I'm surprised, mate.
The conversation's been flowing very well. Some great comments by the watchers out there. Henry's answered them, I think, very clearly. I think the biggest concern is to everyone that the threat of the extremism of Islam and their want to not integrate with us is a massive threat. And that has took a lot of the focus away from Brexit. But what we need to realise is that, yes, we do need to be speaking about these things. We do need to stand up for these things, and we must ensure that they're done in a way that doesn't encourage violence or anything like that. But until we've got Brexit secure, which is really at risk, then we have no way to stop this. And obviously, part of that is to ensure that we have good border control and obviously increase our security services.
Mark, may I interrupt you? Because actually we did move on from that topic, and there were some things that I would like to actually point out. One of the things about the European Union is that, there is an agreement called the Dublin III Agreement. It doesn't really matter what it's called, but we have an agreement that says that we will, basically compels all EU member states to let me start again. It's to keep it simple. If somebody comes to our borders and they are an illegal immigrant trying to get into our country, then we cannot send them back to the country that they've come from. Under normal international law, that would be the case. But so if somebody comes from Calais and comes across and we find them at Dover, for example, then we can't send them back to France because of this agreement. And if we weren't part of the European Union, we were just different sovereign countries, we could just send that person back to France. At the moment, we can't. We have to send them back to the country through which they entered the European Union. So it could be anywhere. If we don't know where that is, we cannot send them back. We have to keep them. We're required by the agreement to house them, to educate them, to feed them, and in some cases, even to allow their family over. Now, So we've got a real problem with that, and I think that the government should immediately start the process of withdrawing from the Dublin III agreement. Now, in terms of the bigger question of Muslim immigrants, we absolutely have to acknowledge that there are entire communities in parts of our country that are being changed entirely from traditional English, predominantly working class communities into Muslim communities. And the whole process, the whole routine of Islam actually creates such a situation that the 5 days, five times a day praying, the more you get more blessings if you pray as a large group. Now this is something that is quite different to what we see happening with Christianity in the country, and we're seeing a Muslim religious culture dominating in our communities. And I said right at the beginning that we are not listening to the people that live in our communities. We're not giving them a voice in how those communities are shaped. And I think we have the government has a responsibility placed upon it to keep its communities safe and secure. And I think that includes keeping their identity safe and secure. And the rate of immigration from Muslims coming into this country is absolutely burying our own culture, displacing in many places our own culture. We have to listen to people, and we have to constrain such immigration massively in order to be able to get back to that point where we can assimilate it properly.
Mark, does that answer your?
Yes, no, it was a very good answer. I mean, obviously, let's assume we get the Brexit that we want, and we're out, and we have to look at the way that we're going to secure our borders. Now, obviously, it's been spoken very highly of the Australian point system, which I think, let's be honest, it doesn't now work. Something has failed within that system, and it doesn't work because obviously Australia is facing similar sort of threats to us. So we need to be very clear on what sort of process that we are going to have to stop this, and it needs to be something pretty radical and new.
Not necessarily, Mark, if I may say. The point system does work. Theresa May, as Home Secretary and later as Prime Minister, said it doesn't because it means that ministers can't stop somebody coming in if they're undesirable but have accrued the right number of points. Well, what absolute tosh. I mean, we need to give ministers a red card capability to say, you know what, under international law, we can deny anybody we want to from coming into our country. Anybody. For any reason, even if they've got the right passport, the right visa, all their documentation's fine. If we don't want them in the country, we can just say, no, you're not coming in. Now, that's a normal situation under international law, and we've been in the European Union so long, we seem to have forgotten that. Now, the point system can work. The other thing is that we don't need to wait for Brexit before we can do some of this stuff. And it's been very worrying for me to listen, and I'm going to talk now briefly about EU immigration. It'd be very worrying for me to hear government ministers, including Amber Rudd, say that we're going to end freedom of movement, and in the next sentence saying we're going to register EU citizens who want to live here. Now, you know what? I'm in Vienna, and if I want to live in Vienna, I have to register. I've lived in Brussels. I have to register. The police come and knock on your door to make sure you live where you say you live. Okay, everybody has to register. In the UK, you don't have to. And making EU citizens register for immigration purposes as resident in the UK absolutely is not in any way reducing the freedom of movement. Yeah. And we need to get right back on top of this. We've got a lot of powers in the UK that we are simply not using. So we need to start the process right now of putting in place all of our a properly robust immigration process. It is so complicated, a bit like our tax system. It is now so complicated that there are so many little gaps in it, and nobody really understands it fully. So you can wriggle through it, and we need to simplify it, and we need to get it in place now, not wait until Brexit. Of course, some elements have to wait until Brexit, but certainly not all. Only the elements relating to EU citizens.
Okay. Your last couple of comments have been more popular than about the transitional bit. I thought I'd let you know that, Henry.
Okay.
I'm just going to read a couple of those comments, and then I'll leave you with a question. Marty Kane, correct, Henry. It is not a case of lack of laws. It's a case of lack of enforcement. Stephen Parry, Dublin 3 was a disgraceful rule. Point systems work if implemented right. Marty Kane, the problem with Islamification in Britain is not so much that they're doing what they're doing, but more so down to the fact that our own security services are allowing them to do things because they're in fear of being called racist. It is time to eradicate political correctness and start enforcing UK law in our country.
That's one element, but I mean, we've cut our police forces by about 25%, and a great deal of that has been the backroom functions such as intelligence analysts. So the government, despite all their nice words about our emergency services and our armed forces, are cutting them beyond the bone. They're cut well into the bone. The infrastructure of the police has been fundamentally harmed by these cuts, and again, those cuts need to be reversed. And, where are we going to put that 200 billion or whatever it is from HS2? Well, let's start with there, because we've got a threat that we've got to address.
I'm going to leave you answering a question, if I may, from Barry Greater-X. Do you consider the overpopulation of England to be the most serious situation that is facing us at present? Or if not, what then do you consider is the most serious matter facing our future generations? So I'll leave you on a nice, easy one, huh?
Right, yeah, thank you very much. I mean, it's probably not that difficult. Yes, I think it is. Overpopulation is a massive drain on all our resources, on our finances, on our natural resources, and simply on our quality of life. And our countryside, I include in quality of life. That is another reason why we need to manage and restrict our immigration correctly. Otherwise, we are just, everything about our society is going to be overwhelmed. Its services, its culture, its way of life, and its resources. So we are. And so, simple answer to what is a big debate-triggering question is yes. I think that is probably the largest problem, because it brings with it security risk as well.
Okay. Yeah. Anything you want to add?
Olly, sorry.
You're welcome. Go on, Mark.
Just ask something. Yes. So, Henry, obviously, I knew a lot about you before you stood, but actually not to the depths that obviously I do now. And it was pretty clear that obviously your experience, you would be a strong candidate. Now, I think you've raised your profile absolutely massively since this process, and that is without the support of Nigel being your political referee. What do you think has made people want to support you?
Oh.
Quick, Henry. Quick.
I'd like to say because I'm a great bloke. I'm charming, humorous, and full of charisma, but it's probably not that. I think. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I put the fader up? I put the fader up. Sorry. Carry on, Henry. Carry on.
I thought you were pushing me out there. No, I think people appreciate that experience and skills account for something, and I think that's probably what it is. I'm not going to be arrogant enough to say that it's because I'm a wonderful person.
All right, okay.
Hopefully my wife.
Henry, thank you. Henry Bolton, thank you, sir. Candidate for UKIP for the leadership. We're going to know what's going on Friday next with the... I'm going to be there, actually. We're going to be there. Daily Brexit's going to be at the conference doing I don't know what, having fun.
See you then, Olly.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for coming on. And Mark Childs, thank you for coming on. Thank you for all of your comments. Everybody, you've been tuned into the Daily Brexit. I'm Olly Connolly. God bless you.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Here's to us and bugger plutocracy. Now, how do I turn this damn thing off? There we go.